The last and final division that we will be going over today is the NFC North. And this is another division where I look at it and there are just a lot of storylines when it comes to all four teams. We know everything that has gone down between Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers for this season. We also know everything that's been going down with the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields and that situation. Plus, you have Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. He's been in the news a little bit this offseason. Dan Campbell and Jared Goff, that era will start in Detroit. So there are a lot of things to talk about when it comes to the NFC North. So without further ado, let's get right to it. My prediction to win the NFC North with a record of 11-6 is the Green Bay Packers. And it's funny because I look at this Green Bay Packer team and I look at their schedule, and I do think in terms of regular season, it's going to be very hard for these guys to match the season that they had last year. With that being said, I think Matt LaFleur deserves a lot of credit. Ever since he's gotten to Green Bay in the regular season and, some playoff games as well, all he does is win. And ever since he got to Green Bay, you could see just how engaged the offense has been. We saw Aaron Rodgers under Mike McCarthy, and it was clear things looked stale. There weren't really that many games over the last couple of years of the McCarthy era where Aaron Rodgers just balled out and the Packers won games because of him. Last year, after some time in that offense, he was obviously much more used to it. Aaron Rodgers looked like peak Aaron Rodgers, and he won the MVP of the league, and he was probably the best player in football last year. It was such a phenomenal season. It was so fun to watch. But this year, it's going to be interesting to see if that continues. The Packers, we know everything that went on with the drafting of Jordan Love. I said it at the time, and I'll say it again. When the Packers made that pick, I didn't necessarily hate it if they were willing to realize if this doesn't work out, then we are in big, big trouble. Let me just ask you guys, if you're Aaron Rodgers, how do you feel about just winning the MVP? You literally were the best quarterback in football last year, and the best way your team decides to repay you is by drafting Jordan Love, a guy who is super raw, a guy that I think when the Packers were evaluating him, they kind of had their blurry glasses on and saw some things that Patrick Mahomes was able to do, and were just like, you know what? We're going to take this guy instead. And I don't think enough people realize outside of Green Bay that Jordan Love literally was not good enough last year to be the backup quarterback. He got beat out by Tim Doyle. I think that is something that a lot of Packer fans, or that a lot of NFL fans outside of Green Bay, when it comes to Jordan Love and the future of this Green Bay Packer team, that's something they have to realize. And I think Jordan Love's performance this preseason didn't necessarily enhance the Packers' confidence in him. I feel like the Packers are just a team that, because they drafted Aaron Rodgers a couple years, or 10, 12 years ago, and we know everything that went down with him and Brett Favre, and how Aaron Rodgers had to wait for a couple years, and he came in and ultimately was the next big thing in the NFL. I don't see that happening here with Jordan Love. I just don't think he's good enough. And if the Packers were going to take Jordan Love, they needed to realize that this is such a big decision we are about to make, that if it doesn't work out, considering we know, even though Aaron Rodgers is an elite player, sometimes he could be a little bit difficult to work with. He really isn't the easiest guy in the room to be around and to communicate with. But the Packers needed to realize that their best chance of winning a Super Bowl is with Aaron Rodgers under center. And a couple weeks have passed by since we've discussed Aaron Rodgers and anything with him off the field. And I do like this Packer team. I really would have tried to pick another team in the NFC North to win this division, but I got to be honest with you guys. I just think the Packers are flat out better than everyone else in this division. Aaron Rodgers is really a given 9 to 10 wins when he is under center as your starting quarterback, combined with Matt LaFleur and his ability to win games. Devontae Adams is back. Obviously, they bring back Randall Cobb, a guy who may not be what he once was at one point in his career, but we all know that Aaron Rodgers loves throwing this guy the football. Valdez-Scantling, a young receiver, and Alan Lazard, who I really like. So I do think the Packers are going to have no problem putting up points. A couple concerns for this team. Number one, David Bakhtiari, one of the best left tackles in the league. I do believe if he does play in the NFC Championship game last year, the Packers would have had a really good chance to win the Super Bowl. Yes, they should have won that game anyway, but at the same time, Bakhtiari is a huge key. They also lose Corey Linsley, starting center, to the Los Angeles Chargers, a guy who has been with this team for a while now, and a guy who Aaron Rodgers really trusts. Now, there are going to be two rookies starting on the offensive line, Josh Myers and Royce Newman. They do bring in a new defensive coordinator. I do think that 2 years ago, the Packers defense was one of the more underrated units in the league. They were getting pressure on the quarterback at all times. I really loved the work Zadarius Smith did. And I still think this defense is really good. But at the same time, last year, especially in the beginning of the season, they were kind of a little disappointing. There's talent on this defense. I think Jair Alexander is one of the 5 best corners in the NFL. I love Darnell Savage. I think he's going to be a big-time player in this league for a long time. They drafted Eric Stokes to hopefully replace Kevin King. We all saw what Kevin King did in the NFC Championship game. If you're a Packer fan, I guarantee you're still having nightmares about that game. Also, Kenny Clark is a big key on the defensive line as well. He's been in Green Bay for a couple of years now. I have the Packers finishing, once again, with a record of 11-6. Their over is 10. I'll predict them to go over that. They are minus 175 to win the NFC North. I'm hopping on that. Once again, I tried my best to pick another team not named Green Bay to even consider winning this division, but at the end of the day, I just couldn't do it. That's how much of the difference is between the Packers and some of the other teams in this NFC North. Continuing with the North, the team that I have finishing in second place is the Chicago Bears. However, I had them finishing with a record of 7-10. I think the Green Bay Packers are going to win this division by a wide margin. And when it comes to the Bears, I think this is another team that is super fascinating to break down, right? I remember Matt Nagy's first season in Chicago. I really did think that this guy was the next young star in terms of coaching in the NFL. He got Mitch Trubisky and that Bears team to the playoffs. He deserves credit for that. However, everything changed when Cody Parkey double doinked that kick and the Chicago Bears lost in the playoffs to the Philadelphia Eagles. For the last 2 years, even though the Bears were able to make the playoffs last year, I think you could consider Chicago to be one of the more disappointing teams in the NFL. And they had Mitch Trubisky as their starting quarterback. It is hard to win games with a guy like that as your starting QB, but now you have Andy Dalton, and you have Justin Fields, and it looks like Andy Dalton is going to be under center for Chicago week 1. Everything I've heard around Chicago circles is that Justin Fields is not going to start by at least week 4 or week 5, and to be honest with you, I don't get it. I watch Justin Fields play, and I just look at him. He has every single physical attribute in the book. He is tall, he could run, he has a cannon arm, and by the way, when I said he could run fast. He ran a 4.5 combine, which is faster than most players on the Bears. He's super athletic, and he played in big-time bowl games in college. I am really confused as to why in a quarterback-hungry league, teams are looking to stash new quarterbacks all the time, how this guy fell to 12 in the NFL draft. I'm still not exactly sure why, but the Bears took advantage, and they do deserve credit for that. A lot of people do believe that when it comes to Ryan Pace, he should have been fired a long time ago. I do agree with that statement, but at the same time, you would have then had to bring in a new GM with Matt Nagy still as your head coach. And look, Matt Nagy has disappointed over the last couple of years. He shouldn't have been fired, obviously. Like, they've made the playoffs in 2 of the last 3 years. However, I got to be honest with you guys. The more and more I watch the Bears in the preseason especially, and the more I look at the Chicago Bear team, I just do not trust Matt Nagy to win games this year, especially if Andy Dalton is under center. We know at this point what Andy Dalton is in his career, and at one point in his career, he was a really good quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. He balled out for those Bengal teams with A.J. Green and Gio Bernard and Jeremy Hill. Those teams were super fun to watch. And last year in Dallas, after Dak Prescott got hurt, it was clear to all of us. The Cowboys' offense took a significant step back, and when I watched Andy Dalton, I didn't necessarily think that he was a top 32 starting quarterback in the NFL. Then in the preseason, I understand when you have rookie quarterbacks, you shouldn't just automatically give them the job right away. As I mentioned earlier with San Francisco, I have no problem with them giving the job to Jimmy Garoppolo because it's clear that Trey Lance is raw. And even though he can make some plays, he still needs some time to learn the offense. He still needs some time to tidy up. He hasn't played in a football game really over the past 2 years. He's played in one football game over the past 2 years. So he's still super raw. But Justin Fields, when I watched this guy in the preseason, he looked like someone that was in super command of the offense. He really did a good job leading the guys, and he just didn't panic. I remember when Dwayne Haskins came into the league his first year, it was clear and obvious right off the bat that it was going to be sooner rather than later until Jay Gruden, the Washington head coach, would be fired. And Dwayne Haskins learning that offense was just a waste because there was going to be a new head coach in the following season. I think if the Bears really want to invest in Justin Fields, they should do it right now to start. I totally understand that the Bears' offensive line is a joke. It's one of the worst units in the league. But at the same time, Andy Dalton is going to get himself killed behind that offensive line. He's not mobile. He can't move at all. At least Justin Fields can. The Bears' only hope is this defense who, look, I think it's a good defense, but I do think over the last couple of years, we've been automatic to put the Bears defense in the top 3-4 units in the league, and I totally understand why. When you look at Khalil Mack and Eddie Jackson, Tashawn Gibson, Jalen Johnson, like Akeem Hicks, like they have some really good players, but at the same time, I've still been waiting for them to just step up, take over a game, and win a game by themselves. If they're not able to do that this season, I think it could be a rough season for the Bears, and I just feel bad for Chicago fans. The Bears are literally a team that has never had a 4,000-yard passer in the history of their franchise. That is a crazy stat to me that I think could be just historically bad. That doesn't happen to a team unless you're just cursed when it comes to the quarterback position. They have to start Justin Fields as soon as possible, and the annoying thing is it doesn't look like that is going to happen. The Bears right now, over-under win total in Vegas is 7.5. I will take the under on that, and they are plus 400 to win the NFC North. The team that I'm going to have coming in third place in the NFC North, and this is going to be a team that will fall under the category of one of my more disappointing teams in the NFL this season. That would be Kirk Cousins, Mike Zimmer, and the Minnesota Vikings. And I will say this when it comes to Minnesota. There's talent on this team. I just can't trust them. I think Mike Zimmer is a good, solid coach. There are plenty of coaches in the league much worse and much more incompetent than him. But at the same time, when your head coach quarterback situation, or combination, I should say, is Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins, I'm just not exactly sure how high your ceiling could be. And I don't know if you're going to be able to outduel Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady or even Matthew Stafford in a big-time playoff game. I just don't see that happening. And another thing, I'm very concerned that at multiple times this season, the vaccine is going to be an issue in the Minnesota Vikings quarterback room. Kirk Cousins has made it known that he is not vaccinated. And I'm not saying this as a political statement or a political side. All I'm saying is this. If you don't think that COVID and whether or not players are vaccinated or not is going to have a major big-time effect on the NFL this season, then you just clearly haven't been paying attention during the offseason. The NFL, with the rules that they have installed, have made it very clear. We want you to get vaccinated. We want our product on the field as strong as possible, and the best way to ensure that is making sure as many players in the league as possible are vaccinated. And we saw this happen earlier in camp with Kirk Cousins. He just got buzzed for contact tracing. He didn't necessarily even test positive for the virus. He missed a practice, and I'm just worried that's going to happen during the regular season right before a game. The quarterback position in the NFL is just so valuable. I'm not telling anyone what to do or what to put in their body. All I'm saying is in the NFL, it is difficult when you can't rely on your starting quarterback to be under center and in practice and in the meeting room week in and week out. And that's my first red flag with the Vikings. I think the defense is good, but I just don't think it's elite. I don't think it's a defense that is going to win you games with their play. I think if the Vikings want to win, offense would be the best way to do it. I don't trust this offensive line whatsoever. I don't trust Kirk Cousins. I'm not the biggest fan of their head coach. Like, once again, he's good, but at the same time, I don't know what his ceiling is. I wouldn't be shocked, to be honest with you, if he's out the door by the time the season ends. But hey, they do have a young receiver in Justin Jefferson who broke out last year, was one of the great stories in football. I'll be curious to see if he could improve on that and get better entering 2021, his second season. Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook. It was obviously also a tough injury losing the young tight end, Irv Smith. I'm a huge fan of his. I think he would have been a big difference maker for this Vikings offense. Unfortunately, he is out for the season with a devastating injury during camp. Right now in Vegas, the Minnesota Vikings, they are plus 200 to win the NFC North, and right now their over-under is 9. I will take the under on that. I do think Minnesota is going to be one of the more disappointing teams in the NFL. And to finish off, the Detroit Lions, they will be my prediction to come in 4th place in the NFC North with a record of 3-14. When it comes to Detroit, I'll say this. They are the laughingstock franchise of the NFL, right? There's no doubt about it. That is a place where football careers, no matter how good you are, go to die. But at the same time, I do think the Lions right now, from afar, are just an easy team to pick on. They hired a coach in Dan Campbell who makes you think sometimes, based on his press conferences, he's better suited to coach Friday Night Lights than in the NFL. However, this guy was Sean Payton's top assistant for many years in New Orleans. Like, I don't think you get that title unless you're really smart and know the game of football. Another thing for me, when it comes to these head coaches, I mentioned it earlier in the show, I believe, is how you handle the media and what you look like at the podium. I watched Dan Campbell in just his normal press conferences when he's not out here talking about breaking each other's kneecaps and how much coffee he drinks during the morning. He is a guy that knows football, and I do think he's going to have the Lions at least ready to play in most of the games that they have. The issue is just the talent, and the Lions are obviously a rebuilding team. Jared Goff playing behind that offensive line could be a big work in progress, and it just comes down to this in Detroit. The Matt Patricia era, it sucked. It really set this team back for a while, and it's funny because I remember last year at this time, I fell for it. I picked the Lions not to win the division, but to make the playoffs as a wild card. With Kenny Golladay and Matt Stafford, they draft DeAndre Swift. I thought this offense could have been one of the more explosive offenses in the league. Obviously, that wasn't the case. They let Matthew Stafford go, get an extra first-round pick along with Jared Goff. But look, I look at this team. Their number one wide receiver right now is Tyrell Williams. I think he's a number 3 receiver on a good team. That is the Detroit Lions' number 1 wide receiver. And I like TJ Hawkinson. He is a very good receiving tight end. But when those are the weapons that you're throwing to, and the offensive line is the way it looks, you compare that to what Jared Goff had in Los Angeles with an elite play caller in Sean McVay, a really good offensive line, good weapons, a good running game. And I think Detroit with DeAndre Swift, they also bring in Jamal Williams. I think the running game could be okay, but ultimately I think we could all agree it's not going to be enough to necessarily win the Detroit Lions football games. They drafted Penei Sewell, who is huge to this organization. They're going to need him to come in right away and be a big-time player, playing right tackle. It hasn't really gotten off to the best start over there in Detroit. You combine him with Taylor Decker, that hopefully should be a pretty good tackle combination. And also Jeff Okudah, a kid that they took in the top 5 in the 2020 NFL draft. He really struggled last year. He struggled in the preseason, and that's another guy that if I'm a Detroit Lion fan, I'm really going to want this guy to develop and get better sooner rather than later. Because, not going to lie, guys, if I'm a Lion fan, I am a little bit concerned about Jeff Okudah, a guy that is supposed to be one of your top dogs on defense, especially defense right now. When I look at it, like there just aren't really that many impact players. Okuda is going to be a guy that has to step up big time. I will have the Lions finishing in last place with a record of 3-14. And by the way, you guys know who the Lions offensive coordinator is? Yeah, Anthony Lynn, my guy that just has no idea how to manage the clock. You combine him, Jared Goff, I just don't see it, especially playing behind that offensive line. Lions will be my fourth place team in the NFC North with a record of 3-14. To recap, Packers win the NFC North 11-6. I'll have the Bears in second with a record of 7-10. Had the morning coffee. Vikings in third with a record of 6-11, and Lions in fourth with a record of 3-14. So that is my division preview for each and every division in the NFL.